Hi everyone, my name is Ricardo. I'm one of the tutorial teachers and I'm going to be your guide during the knowledge clips of this block. Now in this block, you're going to expand on your argumentation skills. On the one hand, you're going to learn how to critically evaluate research for yourself. And on the other hand, you're also going to learn how to build more convincing scientific arguments of your own. But to get you ready for that, first we need to discuss some important things. One is the structure of a scientific paper. Now, the reason for this is that it's important that you know what the structure is, what the purpose is of the different parts of the structure, so that you can assess for yourself whether these are actually living up to their purpose, and so that you can critique that argumentation that happens in each of these components. But before we get into any of that, let's first take a look at the question of why is it so important to critically evaluate scientific research for yourself? We're going to do that by looking at a study by Brian Nosek from 2015. And he had a question, which was, do football referees give more red cards to dark-skinned players than to light-skinned players? Now, he gave the exact same data set to 29 different research teams. And he asked them, hey, can you please just look at the data, do your analysis, and let me know what the outcome is? What do you think the results were? Well, let's take a look at them. So what you can see is that some of them are significant, but some aren't. So in total, 20 studies found a significant effect, saying that dark-skinned players are more likely to get a red card than light-skinned players. But there were also 9 studies that did not find a significant effect. Now, not only that, there were also differences in how much more likely they thought that dark-skinned players were to get red cards. Now, here you can see you have some of them hovering around the 1.5 times as likely. You have some that are around the equally likely, but up here in the upper right-hand corner, you even have one that says, hey, they're 3 times as likely to get a red card. Right next to it, another one, another study that did not find a significant effect. Now you might look at this and think, they have the exact same data. How on earth is it possible that they had such differing results? And the answer is, well, there were differences in the assumptions that they had. There were differences in the choices they made. There were differences in the models that they applied. There were differences in the covariates that they included or decided to not include. So yeah, that leads us to the following realization about scientific research. A scientific article is not simply a statement of truth. It is always based on human assumptions, human argumentation, human choices. And yeah, as we all know, humans are imperfect and so are their products. And that means that you can question it. Now, if a scientific article is not simply a statement of truth, what is it then? Well, it is an argument for a specific truth claim based on data. It is an argument for a specific truth claim based on data. So all of those choices that we were just talking about, they all need to be backed up by argumentation. And they have to be based on, and the conclusions have to be based on data. And you're the one that has to determine for yourself if you find that argument convincing or not. So while you're reading a scientific article, you're constantly asking yourself, how did the authors arrive at their conclusions and how valid are they? Now, why is it so important for you to determine the validity of scientific conclusions for yourself? Well, let's take a look at what might happen if you don't. For one example could be you're pursuing a fruitless line of research. So say, for example, you're a researcher and you encounter an article that states that there is a positive effect of visualization techniques on athletic performance in the short term. Now, you think, whoa, that's interesting. Okay, there might also be long-term effects. So you put 2 years worth of research into these long-term effects. Eventually you find nothing. You go back to the original study, you find out, the statistics there aren't quite right. And actually the conclusion wasn't really based on solid argumentation either. There goes 2 years of your life. Of course, I'm exaggerating a bit, but this is of course not completely unthinkable. Now, another scenario, you might be a psychotherapist and there might be a new type of intervention that might be useful for your clients. And you might want to apply it, but at the same time, you have to critically look at the article that found a positive effect. Was it really done with proper argumentation? Was it done with solid statistics? Because if it wasn't, the problem is not just that you might not find an effect. The problem might even be worse. It might have an adverse effect. You might actually be negatively affecting your client. So you have a responsibility to find out for yourself how valid the conclusions of those authors were. You can't just blindly follow it. Now, you might also think, I'm not going to be a researcher. I'm not going to be a therapist. So what does it matter? But scientific argumentation is all around us. You find it in politics. You find it in what you should eat and what you should not eat. It's all around us. And it's constantly required to justify all kinds of things. So by learning how to critically evaluate scientific research and argumentation, you are going to learn how to critically evaluate arguments in general. And also you learn how to build stronger arguments of your own, which is going to be useful anywhere you go. Okay, another thing I'd like to say is do not get discouraged. In the previous years, we've noticed that students can get discouraged or disillusioned by the many flaws that they find in scientific research. But the scientific process is a messy process. Not a single study is perfect. And how we approximate the truth is by critiquing studies, seeing which ones can stand a test, and then putting together the knowledge from all of these imperfect studies, bringing them together to come to more solid conclusions. And yeah, basically, you're going to learn now how to critique these studies as well and contribute to the scientific process in that manner. Okay, now we've established that a scientific paper is an argument based on data and that you need to evaluate for yourself whether that argument is convincing or not. To help you even more with this, we're going to look at the structure of a scientific paper. Now, a scientific article consists of the following parts. Now, you already know this. The introduction, the methods, the results, and the discussion. Now, what's interesting about this is that in each of these components, there's some different argumentation going on, and it really pays off to know what the argumentation is so that you know how to critique it. So we're going to go through these components one by one, look at what the argumentation is. Now, the introduction. What are the authors arguing for in the introduction? Well, the entire introduction serves to justify the research question. You're basically saying, hey, my research question makes sense. You're justifying your design, saying, hey, the way I decided to investigate my research question also makes sense. And eventually you're also saying, hey, my hypotheses, the direction of the effect that I expect also makes sense. Now, how do you make this argument? One is by talking about the societal relevance. You're saying there's some problem out there in society or some room for improvement, and my study is going to contribute to solving the problem or improving society in this way. That's why I should research it. You also have the scientific relevance, which says like, we have this body of knowledge and we know all these things about this phenomenon, but there's this one thing that we don't know, and it's actually quite crucial. And that's what I'm going to investigate. And I'm going to contribute to the scientific body of knowledge by investigating it. The plausibility of the hypotheses. So you expect a certain effect, right? And so say you're a therapist, you want to have your therapy to have a healing effect, or if you're investigating a therapy. And so you want to make a case that the therapy is actually going to have a healing effect. So the plausibility of the hypotheses, the direction of the effect, You substantiate that on the one hand with theory, but also by saying prior research found that there was a positive effect. So I should find a positive effect as well. Okay, so while you're reading the introduction, this is basically what you're going to be asking yourself constantly is, how does this justify the research question? How does it justify the design? How does this justify the hypotheses? Then the next section is the method section. Now, what is the purpose of the method section? Well, on the one hand, it's complete representation of materials and procedures to aid replication, so that other researchers can replicate it. But it's also that the authors are trying to provide you with enough information about the method so that you can assess for yourself whether or not they took the correct approach in trying to answer the research question. Did they take the biases out? Did they do a double blind placebo-controlled study? Did they do all the right things that they needed to do to make sure that they investigated the research question in the right way? So this is what you're going to try and assess while you're reading the method section. Okay, then we have the results section. Now, if we say that a scientific paper is an argument based on data, in the results section, that's where they discuss the data. Now, what is the purpose of the results section? Well, first it's to say, hey, this is what we found. These are the results. Then to say, hey, we treated the data in the proper way. We analyzed it with the appropriate analyses, so the results are actually valid. And yeah, why is this so important? Because they're going to show conclusions. And why is it so important? Well, they're going to show conclusions in the discussion section. And they're going to base these conclusions on the results section. And if the data were not treated properly, if the appropriate analyses were not used, that argument that they make in the discussion has no solid foot or solid leg to stand on. So while you're reading the results section, you're constantly going to be asking yourself, hey, did they treat the data in the right way? Have they lived up to all of the assumptions? Have they checked their assumptions? Did they apply the appropriate analyses? And this is what you're going to be checking while you're reading the results section. And then finally, we have the discussion section. Now, what are they arguing for in the discussion section? Again, the societal relevance. We had that already in the introduction. You're going to say, I contributed to society with my research in this and this way. The scientific relevance, I contributed to science in this way. The plausibility of the hypotheses. You might have found that your hypotheses don't really, come out the way you expected, or that they did, but you're going to have to dig back into the previous research, and you're going to have to dig back into the theory to explain why you found what you found. And eventually, you want to say that you either managed to answer the research question so that we now know more about the phenomena that we were investigating, and that's going to contribute to the societal relevance. Or you want to say, even if I did not answer this research question, my research was still worthwhile because we learned something new, like how you should investigate this phenomena or how you should not investigate this phenomena. Okay, so these were the arguments that are presented in the different components. Now that you know that, what next? Well, we created a critical reading checklist for you, which is basically a tool that's going to help you go through the critical evaluation of a scientific article step by step. In the beginning, it can be kind of overwhelming, like there's so many things to look at. So we created this checklist to give you to give you a step-by-step systematic way of which you can go through it. But we have a knowledge clip about that where you can learn more about it. But first start with the PA. And during the PA, you will be prompted, they will tell you when it's time to look at this knowledge clip about the critical reading checklist. Okay, that was that for this knowledge clip. I wish you guys a lot of luck and see you in the next video.